Hello and welcome to this month's In Conversation Masterclass. I'm absolutely delighted to have Joanna Penn with me, a marvellous example of nominative determinism. I wish I'd been called Penn, but no, I'm Parfitt instead. But it's lovely to have you here. I can't remember when it is I first met you, but I think it was via Twitter, and I reckon we've been in touch for a good decade probably. But
Well, thanks for having me, Joe. And I think I was living in Australia. I think it was a decade ago. And I think someone on my podcast back then, because I've been podcasting so long, introduced me to you. I think it was a children's author, Simon someone, but it was a very long time ago.
Well, it's absolutely lovely to have you. I've been doing these In Conversation masterclasses for a year now, and it's absolutely fantastic to have you now talking about how authors who have written books or plan to write books can actually make some money from it and turn it into a real business. Because for many it feels like it's an indulgence or just a hobby, but you're a great example of someone who does this properly and makes a living from it. So Joanna is known as the Creative Penn, thecreativepenn.com. She has a podcast at Books and Travel and at the Creative Penn, and she has written 32 books, she thinks, on fiction and non-fiction, and has sold hundreds of thousands of copies all over the world. So if we could bow down to you via Zoom, we would bow down to you. So we're delighted that you have come to join us today, and thank you very, very much. I'd just like you to start off, please, by telling us how it began, how your first book began.
Yeah, sure. So basically, I used to work as an IT consultant, and I worked in Europe and the UK and then in Asia Pacific. And I was never really happy in that career. I tried lots of different things. I started a scuba diving company. I started doing property investment. I tried lots of different things because I just wasn't happy. And I know this is a very common sort of origin story. And when I thought about what do I really enjoy doing, it was I really like reading books and I really like traveling. And I also wrote a lot at the time. I've been journaling since I was sort of 15. I've got loads of journals behind me. And I was like, well, maybe I should write a book. I could write a self-help book on career change. How do you find a job you really like? And so that, and in the process of doing that, I'm sure I'll figure out what I can do with my life, because I will learn about that. You know, I love research. So I started writing that in around 2006. I was living in Australia. It was called How to Enjoy Your Job or Find a New One, the first edition of that. And what happened was, in writing it, I obviously learned about writing, about structuring nonfiction, and then I discovered the publishing industry. And up until that point, I didn't really understand what went on. And someone told me, oh yeah, you need to find an agent and a publisher, and it might take a couple of years. And I was like, no way, screw that. I can do this myself. I'm a businesswoman, and also I do like to make money. You know, I'm an artist, but I also like to make money. So at that point, I self-published. That was early 2008. This was before the Kindle, before, you know, just as the iPhone came out. So it was really the beginning of the digital era. And I very swiftly learned that you need to learn about book marketing. So within a year, I essentially started a blog, a podcast, YouTube channel. I started speaking. And from there, so that was 2008, I then started writing more books, started writing fiction the year after. So I write thrillers and dark fantasy as JF Penn. So I have two brand names. And essentially from there, all I've done over the last, 13 years is write books, and podcasts has been my main marketing channel, and adapt along the way. But I basically run my own publishing company. I only publish my own books or those I co-write. And, you know, I'm sure we'll come on to that. But yeah, I left my job in 2011 and started making six figures in 2015. And now I run a multi-six-figure international business. So it's definitely taken time, but it's been worth it.
My goodness. So if people buy all the books that you've written on how to write and market a book, will they get where you are?
Well, you actually have to write the books yourself.
Apart from that.
That would be the important step. But yeah, all I've really, I mean, I started writing, I didn't start writing books for writers, obviously. My first book was on career change. I rewrote that in 2012. But what happened was, as I learned along the way, people would always ask me questions. And this is very true with nonfiction, right? I know you've done it. I'm sure people listening, you write the first book of your heart because that's the one that drives you, but then people start asking you questions. And so for example, I've got a free ebook called Successful Self-Publishing, and it's free because people ask me so many questions. I'm like, here's the free ebook, please go read that, because I do not want to answer these questions over and over and over again. And that's just been true. As I've learned things, I've written another book on that topic because people have questions. And I feel like as long as I'm still learning, then I will keep writing and podcasting for authors. And you know how this stuff goes, the world changes all the time. So I never stop learning and I never stop sharing. And then my fiction is just another side to me, another side to my personality. And every time, you know, I go on a trip or I learn something new, I want to write a story. So it just kind of feeds itself, really.
I see. So you've written a lot of books, and I think a lot of us would be interested to know where you start. Do you start with research? What's the first thing you do when you're going to, you know, you're going to write another one? And I guess at this rate you're writing 3 a year. But what you must have you got it down to a fine art now. So where do you
Yeah,
start?
I mean, I'm very driven by what I'm learning and experiencing. So I guess that's driven by the muse as such. With my fiction, it's where I travel, which is why this year I ran out of ideas. As we've mentioned, the Netherlands. My last book, Tree of Life, which came out in November, is about it's actually about the Portuguese Empire. We've got people from Portugal, but it opens in the Netherlands and with the Jewish synagogue there in Amsterdam, where I visited, and I was like, wow, there is a story here. And I picked up a book called Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean, and I was like, okay, this is great. It's a non-fiction book about the Jews who ended up being pirates. And so I was like, there's got to be an adventure there somewhere. So I tied together, and we went to Lisbon as well. So I tied together Amsterdam, Lisbon, and then various places in the Caribbean and Latin America. So that was, I went on a trip, I had an idea, and then I look for the story. So that's fiction. And then with nonfiction, it comes from, look, people just keep asking me this stuff. So your author business plan was, people just kept saying to me, look, can you help me with my business plan? And I don't, someone just asked there, I don't mentor writers. I don't do any one-to-one consulting anymore. But essentially I write the book that will help people do that themselves. So that's mainly how I write nonfiction, is people need to know something or I learn something. So for example, I wrote a book on how AI, artificial intelligence, is going to impact writers in the next decade. And that is stuff I'm learning about all the time. So I just wrote that just before Christmas. It's very short, but it was like, oh, I learned something, so I want to produce. So consume and produce is kind of my the way I do everything. I learn something, so I write a book about it. Because once you start, I mean, you know, once you start, the ideas do not stop. I've got at the moment about 12 books on my list. As they move up, you know, more ideas fill the thing. So I truly love what I do, obviously, and I write whatever comes next in the queue, basically.
That's interesting. What I've just read in the book, that I was looking at one of your books just before we spoke, is you say that one of the first things you do, though, is you write a pitch for the book.
Well, I only started doing that last year because it just helps a lot, but that doesn't need to be much. It can just be a couple of sentences. It can even be the book title and the subtitle for nonfiction in particular. A nonfiction book people should know what's happening if it's a self-help or business book, because so much of our marketing is done on keywords. So I'm very careful with keywords with my nonfiction. With my novels, because I mainly write in series, my pitch is, you know, who is this for? So and then you know, something about the plot. But yeah, I think I'm not really a plotter or a massive outliner in advance. I mainly come up with an idea, and then because I move quite quickly, I'll just jump into that and get into the research phase and then the writing.
I see. It's interesting. how many books did you have behind you or under your belt before you felt you could make a living from it?
Well, it's interesting. I have never intended to make a living from book sales alone. And this is, I think, really important. I don't even know, there are probably zero or very few number of writers who make money only from book sales, because most writers will make money from a whole load of different things. So for example, you teach, I have a lot of stuff through my website, affiliate income, for example, I do online courses, you do online courses. Many of us have these multiple streams of income, and it's the same, I think, with books. So I don't want to give a number, because there are very famous people who do write one, like particularly in nonfiction, might write one nonfiction book, and then the bulk of their money is made from speaking, professional speaking. So in their case, they only really need one book, and then the ecosystem around that, the other ways to make money from that book or the licensing of that book. And then I guess with fiction, you really need a lot of books. So even right now, I mean, I make 6 figures US from book sales alone, but I'm not doing this for 1 year. I'm doing this for the rest of my life. And so I don't trust book sales. They are different month in, month out, month in, month out. So if you say, right, I'm going to write this one fiction series and that's it, unless you're Jack Reacher, unless you're Lee Child writing a Jack Reacher. But even then, someone like Lee Child is about licensing to film, TV. It's about, foreign translations. It's about all these different things that you do. So I'm not going to give a definitive answer to people in terms of, if you write this many books, you can make money.
So you've multiple income streams you've just mentioned. Can you just sort of give us a tick list of just some of them, mentioning them slowly so that some people could write them down?
Yeah, of course. Well, I guess what I want people to consider, because you guys are all writing books, or you have books already, is that many authors will say, oh, here's my book, I made this, and often they'll be holding a paperback copy in English or whatever language you're writing in, and that's where they are. Maybe they want to sell it in a bookshop in the Netherlands. I think we mentioned someone has one, but a book itself is multiple streams of income. So I've actually sold books now in 162 countries. And that is because my books are available in 190 countries. So first of all, think global. And this is in English. This is purely in English. So publishing globally in ebook format, which is one format, but you can put it out on about 60 or 70 ebook stores now. You can do that through distributors if you want to. Then obviously print. Now I do paperback, large print and hardback. You can also do special editions. You can do all kinds of different things. I do all mine print on demand, but of course you can do print runs. And then audiobook. So audiobook would be my 5th format. So if you think, okay, 5 formats, that's just in English, 162 countries, and then you can also do translations. So I have 5 different languages right now, hopefully more to come. So that's books in providing different income streams themselves. Then you can think about other things. So as we talked about, there is teaching, which might be professional speaking, where you're paid for a talk to a corporate if you're nonfiction, or it might be to a library or a writers group. It might be online things like we're doing right now, where you get paid or people buy your books. Then there's things like I have a podcast and I have a Patreon. So Patreon would be a way to make money if you're doing regular content. So for example, another way to monetize this would be, instead of people paying per session, they might pay X amount per month, and there's a new one every month. So I have patrons who support my podcast. Many people do Patreon for short stories. I know poets who have Patreons. I know authors who have them. Even N.K. Jemisin, who's a huge award-winning fantasy writer, she has one just for her life. And it's
Can I
people
just stop you there, because I don't know what Patreon is.
Okay, well, it's Patreon, patreon.com, and it is a new way of funding. I mean, you've heard of Kickstarter, right? Kickstarter is for a specific project. No, that's not.
I know. It's stupid predictive text. keeps redoing it. I'm trying to stop it.
I can type it in if you like.
So I've done it. It's all right this time.
Oh yeah, you got it. Yeah.
I just kept correcting it.
So basically, Kickstarter is when you do a specific project. So an example before Christmas was Brandon Sanderson, who's a very famous fantasy writer, did a Kickstarter for a special edition, special hardback edition of the books that were 10 years old. And he made a lot of money, like $7 million. Most of us won't be doing that, but that is, you know, and that's for special editions that he kept from his traditional publisher. He excluded that license on his contract. So he's doing very well from special editions. But Patreon is a regular monthly support. So people pay per month, or they might pay for me like per podcast. And it might only be $1 a month or $2 a month or €2 or whatever. And then every month I get payment from people who want to be part of my community. And I do a Q&A audio. That's all I do extra every month is a Q&A audio. But this is for people who have an audience who really love your work and they're super fans. It's the idea of Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans, which is people, you know, there's this whole world out there, and some of those people are going to not be interested. Most of those people are not interested in you at all. Some of those people may buy your books, and some of those people will be super fans and will love everything you do. And so what you have to consider these days is that you need these multiple streams of income and different ways for people to interact with you. And if all you've got is one book, maybe they'll spend $5, $10, $20. That's all they can spend on you. But what if they really love your stuff and they want to support you more? And I think we're living in this era where people understand that it's difficult as a creator or an artist to make a living, and that the big stores take a cut. I mean, bookstores, you mentioned someone has a bookstore. There's been plenty of bookstores in the pandemic who've used sites like Patreon to actually get their customers to support their bookstore, which is brilliant. So people want to support the brands they love, the authors they love, but you do need an audience to do Patreon.
So is Patreon a sort of spin on the word patron?
Yes, basically. It's all about having patrons, and I advise people to go and have a look. People are doing all kinds of wonderful things. Like musicians are doing really well, you know, lots of podcasters, lots of writers. Just go and have a look. And I think also with Kickstarter, it's really good to have a look and see if some of these different ways of making money are a good idea for you. So another one, just before we, you know, move on from revenue streams, is affiliate income. So I promote software, for example, Scrivener. Many of us write on Scrivener, and I have an affiliate link to Scrivener, and every time someone uses my link, I get a cut of that sale. So that is, and I do that, I make tutorials and things for software, and that is another stream of income that comes from me promoting the things that I love. And all of this is ethical and helping people and useful.
Yes, I know that you do it with ConvertKit, the database. What do you call it? Contact management.
It's email. It's an email management.
Email management. Yes, I know. I've seen some of the stuff you've done with ConvertKit, and it was very well done indeed. And I can see why they want you to be an affiliate. I mean, to have an affiliate link to this. That's really, really interesting. Thank you for explaining Patreon. I'm sure I'd be really interested to know if anybody here had heard of it before. And I feel really ignorant that I didn't. I'd seen the name, but I didn't understand what it was. And now, with my tail between my legs, I shall go and have a look at that. You talk as well about income streams being scalable. What do you mean by scalable?
Yeah, so basically 95% of what I do is designed to be, I guess, consumed more than once. So even this, for example, we're recording this now, and this amount of time that we've put aside, we will use this time once, and then people listening are here, and then you have the recording. So for everything I do, like a book, you can create a book and it can sell once to your mum, or it can sell 1,000 times, 10,000 times, 1,000,000 times for the rest of your life and 50 to 70 years after you die. So it's scalable because the time you spend anyway, but then the money keeps coming and coming and coming. So it's scalable because money for time is only taken once. And this is why I don't do consulting or mentoring and very little speaking now. It's because that time is not scalable. I get paid once and that's it. And I can help one person. Whereas if I use that time to write a book or to do a podcast episode, then that can help thousands of people or millions of people and will make me money for the long term. So this gives us a couple of things. This gives us recurring revenue month after month, but it also gives us freedom, because it means that I can manage my time a lot better. I left my day job because I didn't want to have bosses, so I don't have clients, and I work when I am inspired, which is most of the time. And I love my work, which is great, but I feel like I have so much I want to create in my life. And I think the pandemic has made us all feel like life really is short. So spend your time creating things that will last, a body of work that will last. And the money for time approach, what I tend to recommend is that you kind of do this. Obviously, we all need money for time at the beginning. That might be freelance work or whatever. And then over time, you want to build up assets. And the assets, the intellectual property assets, which are your books and all of that, they are the scalable things. And they keep bringing you money over and over again.
Interesting. I see. So that's a good time for us to move into your podcast. So explain why you do your podcast, what it actually is, and what you do with that to because I know you then turn your podcast into several other bits.
Yeah, so I started podcasting in 2009 with the Creative Penn podcast. And the main reason was that I didn't have any friends, author friends. I didn't know any authors. I was working as an IT consultant in Australia, and I wanted to connect with people in the niche I was aiming for. And basically, there were loads of brilliant American authors who were making money with their books. And I was like, I want to know them. How do I know them? Oh, okay, I could start a podcast. At the time, it was pretty new, and I was very early. I'm one of the longest running podcasts for authors. Podcasting really took off in 2014, 2015. I'm sure most people have listened to a podcast, now. It's not new anymore. But essentially, I started it to network, and it has definitely continued to do that for me over the years. So think of it as a way to spend time with someone who you can't actually pay for their time. So for example, I will go on shows. I'll say to people, well, I don't do consulting, but if they have a podcast, I'll spend an hour with you on the phone, and knowing that will go out into the ether and other people will find it. So also I realized in 2009 I had all these books and I didn't know how to sell them. So this is the other side of being an author. You actually have to learn to market your book. Even if you get a traditional publishing deal, you still need to market your book. So I was like, okay, well, what could I enjoy doing that is sustainable, that is marketing? And podcasting is fantastic marketing. It's very intimate. People get to know your voice. You can share your thoughts. It's just a brilliant way if you enjoy it. Of course, I didn't know I was going to enjoy it at the time. So I tried it and started podcasting. I had no listeners really for months and months, and then eventually started building an audience. And now sort of in the sort of top 5% of podcasts in terms of revenue and downloads. So I now have advertisers, people I work with, companies I work with, like Ingram Spark, for example. I don't take other advertising. So it's very ethical advertising. And what else? I guess in terms of turning it into other things, I just have a transcript and I have a virtual assistant who sorts that out. And essentially that's for SEO, search engine optimization. So when you type stuff on Google, my podcast transcript might come up. And I kind of stopped blogging a few years ago now. I personally do not read blog posts. I read books and I listen to podcasts and I listen to audiobooks. So that's what I focus on creating. But just as a broader tip for everyone listening, you have to figure out a way to market your books. So I would suggest you try and find something that you enjoy. And even with podcasting, you don't have to start your own podcast, not at all. You could decide, for example, I'm going to pitch one podcast a month for the next year, in topics that relate to my book, for example.
Interesting. That makes a lot of sense. So what I'd be interested to talk about now is another thing that I've just been reading in your book that I makes so much sense, and I don't know that people or the authors necessarily think about it, and that is branding. Or branding an author. You think about branding a company, but maybe not an author. So what do you mean by branding yourself as an author, and how might that manifest?
Well, first of all, as an author, you are a company, whether you are incorporating or not. But yes, and actually I have one company, but I have several author brands. So essentially your brand is the promise to the reader. So when people, like if I say Stephen King, everyone has something in their head. It'll probably have the color black in it. And it will be, you know, have some horror in it, although he writes across so many genres. But so this is really around your author name. It can also be around series. So for example, Joanna Penn, you know, you're interviewing Joanna Penn, happy, upbeat, positive, talking about writing, publishing, book marketing, that kind of thing, making money as a writer. That's what Joanna Penn does. You don't buy, well, there will never be a Joanna Penn book on losing weight, for example. I'm not in a weight loss niche. I mean, sure, like everybody, I have some thoughts around that, but I'm not going to write a book on it. I'm not going to set up a podcast on weight loss. I'm not going to do that. Or J.F. Penn is my thriller, dark fantasy, crime. J.F. Penn writes fiction. She might write some non-fiction, but it will be related to her fiction. So for example, I've got an idea around writing a travel book that is related to my travel for my book research. That's what I would put under J.F. Penn. It's got, if you see my book, or some of my book covers are behind me, they're quite small, but the white ones, you can see there's some white covers. Those are Joanna Penn books. The dark covers, they're J.F. Penn books. So branding is the promise to the reader, but it also encompasses your design, the design of your website, the colors you use, the way you present yourself, the photos on your website. It's, you know, I mentioned cover design, what you have on your social media presence, all of that communicates to readers a subtlety. And this is why book covers are so important. They have to resonate with the genre. If they don't, then someone won't pick them up. So you have to really get to know your niche, and then have a book cover that when people look at that book cover, they're like, oh yeah, I know exactly what that is. And again, it's much easier with nonfiction because you can just have text is, you know, big on a non-fiction, and you know what it is. But with fiction, you have to do it through images, you have to do it through words around the title, that type of thing. So the reason why brand is important, it's kind of a shortcut. It takes a while, and you don't have to have a brand out the gate. It will develop anyway, and you can change direction over time, absolutely. But it's more like, now all I have to do is put out a book under Joanna Penn or under J.F. Penn, and there are people who know what they're going to get. And if I fulfill that promise, I know I can sell books. And then of course I do marketing to a wider audience, but if you have already sold books to someone, it's much easier to sell books to that person again. So satisfying our existing customers is the key to having a really good career. Obviously it takes a while to build, but yeah, those are some things around brand.
No, I think that's very interesting. And also you're branding yourself just with your background. I'm branding myself with my background to a certain, because Joe Parfitt's purple. And so I try to do that. Also, I'm in my kitchen, and I don't want you to see my kitchen right now. But you've got your books behind you, and it's after what you've just said, I expect everybody's now looking at your background, and they can immediately see there is a consistency to your two main genres. It's really clear to see behind you, and it's clear to see that your books about writing, they're mainly words on the cover, and they're the white and a small image, and then the fiction is darker, but there's a definite pattern. So it's obvious you practice what you preach. So that was very interesting. So everybody have a look at the screen behind Joanna, because I think it will teach you an awful lot. But what you also said, which I think is very important, is that your brand is that you're happy and upbeat and accessible. And
as Joanna Penn. J.F. Penn's a bit darker.
Is she grumpy?
No, not grumpy, but she, you know, she's more interested in death culture than being happy and upbeat.
But it's a very, very important point, which brings me on to another thing that you talk about, which is how to engage these people who we hope will end up becoming super fans. I think, so correct me if I'm wrong, that you're saying that the starting point should be the website. And then you want people to come to your website and you want them to engage and you want them to stay. So can you talk us a little bit through that process about what you do in order to make people come to your website and engage?
Yeah, so again, it will depend what genre. Are we really talking non-fiction here? Is no one here
No,
a
oh
novelist?
no, there are lots of fictions here too as well.
Okay, right. Well, then these are two very, very different ways of
Oh,
marketing.
ah,
So because with fiction, if you come to my fiction website, jfpenn.com, it doesn't have, you can buy my novels, you can buy my box sets or audiobooks, but I'm not going to teach you how to write a novel from JF Penn. Whereas with the Creative Penn, as a non-fiction author, I have a whole ecosystem of products and services and tools that will lead you into different things, because you are trying to write a book and I have lots of information that can help you write a book. So self-help non-fiction is much easier to have a really good website with lots of content. It's much, much easier to do that. Now, with fiction, I have in the last couple of years started my books and travel podcast, which is a way into my fiction world and a way to get people hearing my voice and connecting with me in a different way. But fiction, I would say with fiction, a lot of people don't even care about the author, to be honest. They are, until they've read a few books. I think there was a study that said until people have read 3 books by the same author, they don't even remember the name of the book, so of the author. They might remember the name of the book, but often they won't. I mean, for example, I mentioned Lee Child again. I read Jack Reacher, well, I used to before he retired, but I couldn't tell you any of the book titles. I read Jack Reacher, which is the character, but not the book titles. So that's interesting. So with fiction, the website is important as like, here I am, and you have an email sign up. That's really important. So I have jfpenn.com/free, but you want people on your email list so you can talk to them. So with fiction, the website is, yes, important, but it's not really got tons and tons of content necessarily. I don't think blogging is necessary for fiction authors. I think more books for fiction authors is far more important, and then box sets and series and all these things. For non-fiction, yes, I think the website is much more important, and because you want people to come, you want them to click through to, I want people to look at my tutorials. I want them to stay on the site, sign up for my free author blueprint. Again, get on my email list so I can talk to them. But again, the way in is not necessarily through search. That is one way. So they might come in through search. Another way is through book sales. So I do a lot of Amazon advertising, for example. So if someone picks up my how to write a non-fiction book, they then might come onto my website to sign up for my free blueprint. Or someone might find the podcast first. So the idea is, this ecosystem idea is to have ways that people can find you, and then a way into your email newsletter as the very first thing, because that's the way you're going to keep contact with people over time. I mean, obviously, I don't know who's subscribing to my podcast on Spotify or Apple. I don't even know who those people are. But if they sign up for my email list, I know who they are. And again, we don't know who buys our books most of the time, unless they buy it direct from you through your website, or they sign up for your email list. So this idea of the ecosystem is always considering, sure, I want to sell one book, but I also want to keep selling to these same people for the long term, and also keep serving that audience. I think that's the attitude. It's about serving the audience. And yeah, do you want me to answer any of the question there about engagement or no?
Feel free if you want to, and then won't go to them later. Yes, do.
Yeah, a question there. I don't know if I'll say C. I don't know if I can say her name, but do I get much engagement through the newsletter? Do people reply? So the main thing is with email. So my emails go out to like 50,000 people. So you have to be really, really careful about what you ask. Sometimes I will say, especially during the pandemic, sometimes I will say, I'm really struggling. How are you doing? And that question means I want you to reply. Or even I will say, please hit reply and let me know. Or what are you working on? Please hit reply and let me know. But I only do that maybe once a month or even less than that, because my inbox is just full the next day, and sometimes that can be a bit overwhelming. So what I'd suggest is if you have a small email list, it can be, you know, you definitely want to have that interaction, but as it gets bigger and bigger, it needs to be more scalable. But mainly what I'm doing in my emails, I send pictures. So I have and I do this for fiction and non-fiction. I send pictures of me walking in Bath. People love seeing pictures of Bath. And then I say what I'm writing, and then I have content. So for my non-fiction list, it's, you know, how to write 7 steps to write your novel, or you know, whatever the latest podcast episode was. And for fiction, it's whatever the latest podcast episode was, and probably some sale on one of my books. So there's always book promotion, there might be affiliate links, all of that said. But basically a lot of my revenue is driven from my email list, but it doesn't necessarily mean they reply. It just means they click through and filter into this kind of funnel. So yes, I do sell through the newsletter, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting. I know what I was going to ask. You've talked about the books and travel, because I know there are some people who write novels here. You write about your books and travel podcast being something that you do in order to help feed people towards your fiction books. Can you explain exactly what you do on that podcast?
I mainly just interview people about the places that inspire their stories. But what I'm able to do is every couple of months, I do my own solo show where I talk about how my travel has inspired certain books. So what it means is just, we all need some form of content marketing, and I'm not a fast writer for novels. You know, people who don't do any other marketing but write a book a month, and I have a lot of author friends who do that, they don't need to do anything else. But I write, like my arcane thrillers, I write 1 a year pretty much, and I might write another novel as well, but a non-fiction or whatever, but I'm not a fast writer. So this is a way for people to subscribe and hear my voice and hear what I'm thinking about stuff. It also, again, it's networking, because I'm meeting authors and I get to talk to authors. Like I interviewed Vikram Chandra, who wrote Sacred Games, which was huge on Netflix. And you know, I love India, and we did a session on Mumbai, and I've written about Mumbai in Destroyer of Worlds, and so I'm able to weave in bits about my fiction in talking to other authors. And also I just love it, it feeds my soul. Truly, I love my books and travel podcast, and it will turn into its own business over time. And, you know, given that we sort of were talking about the business plan, you don't need to monetize from day one. What you need is an audience. Once you have an audience, it's very easy to monetize. But most authors seem to be like, oh, how do I make money from this one book? Or how do I make money from a podcast on day one? That's pretty much impossible. The better idea is to build an audience. So for example, if you only have one book, put it for free. Like literally put your ebook for free for 3 months, get loads of reviews on it, and then you can put the price up, and it's going to sell a lot better than a book that you put out for $5.99 that has no reviews on it and no one's going to buy it because no one knows who you are. So this kind of mindset shift of building an audience first and then serving that audience, I think is more interesting if you want to make a living this way.
Fascinating. So what do you exactly do on your Creative Penn podcast?
I interview writers. We talk about things that are useful for writers. So
like
I had a guy from Google Play on last week, and we talked about how to use Google Play to sell more books. I have had people talking about plotting or aspects of craft, and I mean, it's every Monday. In fact, it's often twice a week at the moment, as I cover loads of different topics. But I've got over 550 episodes now over the last 13 years, so I've covered a lot of topics.
That's amazing. So pretty much it's a similar thing to this.
Yes, I guess, yeah, it's an interview show on a specific topic.
Yeah, so it's a similar sort of thing. Well, and there's me doing 1 a month and you doing 2 a week. Puts me to shame, absolutely. Let me just see, I think we've gone through an awful lot of these questions.
Can I just set it in, because this was called your author business plan? I just wanted to set all of this in a sort of structure, because the business plan doesn't have to be 25 pages that you write and give to a bank manager. And I think a lot of authors who are creatives struggle with that idea, but it mainly is it's an attitude of, this is a business. So what do you need in a business? So obviously you need your business summary and your brand, which we've talked about. Then you need to think about production, which is making stuff. And for example, how am I going to produce the books? And how am I going to publish the books and license the books and price the books? And then marketing, we've touched on marketing. You have to have a marketing section on your business plan. And so many authors don't think about that until much later. And then you need the financials, your money mindset, how does the revenue work, and understanding all of those aspects is why a business plan is different from just write a book and stick it out there, because you're actually thinking about all of these different things. And again, don't worry, you can learn this stuff over time. Nobody's born knowing all this stuff. And just as you learn the craft of writing, you can also learn the business of writing if you want to make a living that way. I would say that if it's just a hobby, if it's just for fun, if this is a creative project, you don't need to worry about all that stuff.
Yeah, that's what I agree. I think it's great, the stuff that you've got in your book. I found it really, really helpful. But what I really liked was at the end of each chapter, you just made the reader think by asking them a few questions. And that alone makes it incredibly valuable.
Thank you. Well, here's a tip for people. If you write nonfiction, do that at the end of each chapter, write a series of questions, and then you turn that into a workbook. So there is a companion workbook to your author business plan and a lot of my other books, and that just has the questions in and then a load of lines for you to write your answers in. And this is a very easy way to have another product. So if you write nonfiction, you are missing out if you're not doing a companion workbook for each one.
And you found that easy to do? Because I did a companion workbook once, and the lightning source came back and said you have to have a certain number of words on a page, otherwise they don't call it a...
No, did you have lines? Did you actually have lines?
Yes.
I've never had a problem.
Haven't you? You must have. I think I probably in that book had slightly fewer words than they wanted me to have, so they weren't very happy. No, they said they wouldn't let me sell it anymore. So, but you do have to have a certain number of words for them to classify it as a book, as opposed to
stationery. I think it's stationery is the thing. Yeah. So no, I've never had that issue. But yeah, I really love having the workbooks. And then of course, if you are someone who is running workshops online or whatever, you can offer that workbook and go through it together, and that is a value added for your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I was starting out with my first book, what would you tell me my first 3 steps I should take would be to give myself the best possible chance?
Well, A, what genre is it? And B, chance to do what?
Best chance of actually selling some. I mean, I want to know, would you say, well, the first thing is do the business plan, the next thing is set up a website? What would you think?
Well, no, the first thing is to write the book. So many people obsess about how they're going to publish and sell a book before they've finished, and I feel like most people have not even looked at what category they're in. So I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for agents and publishers because I meet so many authors. So if I say, well, okay, what are your 10 comparison authors or your 10 comparison books? That should be the first thing. So obviously write the book and finish it and get it edited. 2, you should know what genre you fit in, and everyone fits in a genre. And on Amazon, you can have 2 subcategories, but you can actually choose up to 10. And that's something really important. So I would expect you to know exactly where your book is going to fit on the store. Once you know that, when you said, what will give me the best chance to sell, that's going to depend on where you've put it in the store. So for example, I'll talk to someone and they write, say, literary fiction, and it's like, okay, well, what kind of literary fiction? And then if you look in the store, you do not want to be next to Hilary Mantel, or you because you're not going to sell any books. What you want to be is in a category that's easier to reach people. And then the third thing is, where is your audience? Have you started building up an audience, and what are you going to do for that? Is it, for example, you're going to pay for advertising, and that's completely legitimate, or are you going to start a podcast, or are you going to blog, or how are you going to reach people? So I would definitely say you need to take a step back and think first, but that positioning of your book is just so important. And again, coming back to book cover, if you don't have a very clear idea of the category you're going to be in on the store, you might get a book cover design that is completely wrong for your book, or even have a title that is completely wrong for your book. So these kinds of thinking about positioning is the way to sell more books. I mean, really, if you're not getting that stuff right, the rest of it just won't make any difference. So yeah, a lot of that is considering where you want, and also really thinking about what you want to do for the next 5 to 10 years. So I always intended to leave my job. I always intended to make 6 figures or more from this. And so I designed everything around achieving that goal. And so you have to decide, what do you want for this book? What do you want for your author career? And that is also going to make a difference as to how you write and what you write, how you publish, and how or whether even you want to bother marketing.
Thank you. So everything sounds so, you sound as if you've got things sewn up. What mistakes have you made? Have you made any mistakes?
Oh, absolutely. Of course. As I said right at the beginning, I didn't know that you needed to know about marketing. That's why I'm so passionate about talking about. You know, I had 2,000 books printed in early 2008, and I only then, when they were in my living room, did I look at them and go, how do I sell those to people? And then I realized that to sell them these physical copies from my house, I would have to go out and talk to people and, you know, speak. And I did sell I sold some of them, but that was when Kindle took off, and I was like, right, I'm going to start, you know, doing it online and use print on demand. That was when print on demand really started to come into its own and sell globally. So probably another mistake I made was to jump into contracts that I was unhappy with later. So for example, I did some 7-year contracts with ACX, which is audio, and now they've changed things. Now I would not sign that contract. So contracts are a huge thing. You know, you are creating intellectual property, so please look at your contract. I mean, right now the most common contract clause is worldwide English for all formats existing now and to be invented for the term of copyright. I mean, unless they're offering you like 7 figures, I don't understand why anyone would sign a contract like that. Maybe because they don't understand the ramifications, but it's crazy or if you take someone who didn't sign a contract like that, J.K. Rowling kept her ebook rights, and when they said to her, oh, can you just sign this addendum to Harry Potter, she said, no, I won't. I'm going to start my own company, Pottermore, which is now something like 21 billion pound company, because she kept those rights and did not sign the addendum, whereas a lot of other authors did. So let's be more like J.K. Rowling, I say.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very much indeed. I can see them on the shelf behind you. Having had a look at the books that you let me have a look at, I think I'm going to go and buy all your books. I think that you write in such a simple and accessible way. You make it all sound possible. It's very clear, and it's definitely on brand. So could you just list off the titles for us?
I literally can't.
Too many.
Turn
around and read them off the shelf.
No, all I'll say is, I mean, if you come to thecreativepenn.com or go to your favorite store and type in Joanna Penn, they're all there. The only thing I don't have right now is a book on how to write a novel, which I do have a 90,000 word draft on, and I just keep looking at it going, oh no, that's too much work. So yeah, I have non-fiction books on lots of different things to help people. The one that I just put out a few weeks ago is How to Make a Living with Your Writing. Turn your words into multiple streams of income. So that might be useful for some of the audience. Or come on over to the Creative Penn podcast if you enjoy audio.
Yeah. How many thousand words are your books? Because they're not terribly long, are they, the non-fiction?
They vary. So your author business plan, for example, is only about 22,000,
Mm,
but how to write non-fiction book is 80,000. So they really vary.
mm. Thank you very much. So I think we're ready now to open to questions. So let's see. I'll just ask some of them that have come here. Um, would you start building your audience before finishing writing your books?
I think that really depends on what book you're writing and how sure you are that you want to continue. So, for example, when I wrote that first book that became Career Change, I started a blog on changing careers. I got photos done of me in my pinstripe suit. And about 6 months in, I was like, I hate this. I do not want to do this. So I started to build an audience around a brand I didn't want to do. But in a way, I kind of had to do that to learn that. So, sure. And I mean, now I have an audience. So I have built that audience, but it is very, very difficult to build an audience unless you are sure what you're going to do. So
Mm,
it will totally depend on what book you're writing. And if you're writing a novel, it's even harder. So I would say with a novel, you need to have at least 3 books in mind, and then what will tie those books together. So hence why I've got books and travel now. But I've been writing fiction since 2009, and I only started books and travel 2 years ago in 2019. So you don't need to have this right on day one. Don't obsess around the launch of your first book. That really is not the goal, in my opinion. It's much easier to hit the lists a couple of years after you've actually had the book out, because it's well reviewed, you know what you're doing, you have a budget. So yeah, I can see where that question's coming from, but you need to be very, very sure what you're doing.
I can see what you mean there. Um, Maggie's asked, any thoughts about agents?
Uh, Again, you have to decide what your definition of success is. What Again, it's a bit round the wrong way. Many authors think, oh, I'll get an agent and then everything will be fine. That's not necessarily true. The agent might be brilliant, they might get you a
Mm,
deal. Remember, you will pay them 15% for the rest of that book's
mm,
life,
mm,
including after your death, if the book keeps selling that long. So do you want to give up 15% to that person for getting you a deal, as well as the money to the publisher?
mm,
So again, this is why reading your contract is so important, and definitely with an agent, check that contract. So for example, I once got a offer from a New York agent. I was so thrilled because this agent was the agent of a very famous author, and they said, you know, this could be your route. And I was like, oh, this sounds very exciting. And then I got the contract, and it said, we will take 15% of every single thing you write, including your self-published work. Under your author name, we will take that, everything. And I was like, no, you won't. And they wouldn't change it to just be the books they sold. And so I didn't take that contract. Now, who knows? Maybe I could have been whoever if I'd have signed that. But to me, that was not correct. That was not right. So that was an example of an agent contract. I just mentioned the clause around publisher contracts. But look, this again, you can learn this stuff. There are plenty of books about publishing contracts, and you know, if you're there are lots of organizations that can help. So don't think you need an agent or a publisher. I don't have an agent or a publisher. I do all this myself. But look, to be honest, once your book is up there, and once you've done it once, it is not hard. It is not hard to publish a book. What's hard is writing a book and marketing a book. Those
mm,
are the 2 difficult things in this process. And you're going to have to do that regardless of
mm,
who actually shops your work around.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Do we have any more questions, anybody? Okay, Sue has asked, at what point would you approach a publisher if you're
Yes, so
going to?
I'm not the right person to ask that because I don't work with publishers.
Yes, well, I can answer that one. You would approach. It depends what you're writing. If you write a novel, you have to approach the publisher after you've written the novel. If you're writing non-fiction, you can often start off with just a pitch letter about the book. But these days, more and more publishers are wanting you to use an agent, whether you're writing non-fiction or fiction. So what you have to do is you have to go to the agent websites and ask them what sort of submissions they want, whether they want pitch letters or whether they want full manuscripts. And the same with the publishers, go and find out what their submissions process is, and it will be different for every single one. Anyone else got any questions, or shall I stop recording and we can all just have a chat? I think I shall stop recording and we can all just have a chat. So thank you so much, Joanna, for this. It has been quite fascinating. You are a veritable font of information, or is it a fount? I don't know, your fountain of information even. And thank you so much. Do go and have a look at Joanna's stuff at the Creative Penn. Do have a look at her books, find them on the online bookstores. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, do come to more in Conversation masterclasses. They're one every single month. They appear on YouTube. They appear on my website, joeparfitt.com, and they also appear as 10 tips or 6 tips or whatever we've ended up with, and transcribed, and in my newsletter, to which you can subscribe, the Monthly Inspirer. So thank you so much, Joanna, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Jo.